At least 24 kites already hung in the sky, like paper sharks roaming for prey. Within an hour, the number doubled, and red, blue, and yellow kites glided and spun in the sky. A cold breeze wafted through my hair. The wind was perfect for kite flying, blowing just hard enough to give some lift, make the sweeps easier. Next to me, Hassan held the spool, his hands already bloodied by the string. Soon the cutting started, and the first of the defeated kites whirled out of control. They fell from the sky like shooting stars with brilliant, rippling tails, showering the neighborhoods below with prizes for the kite runners.
Hey, wait, can I show you something real quick?
Oh, yeah, I mean, you can show me anything for the next, basically 105 minutes.
I'm just really proud my backyard garden is finally doing pretty good. So this was today's...
Oh, wow. Look at that. Look at that kale. Look at that dinosaur kale.
Most of it grown in buckets and this vertical planter. And...
limes? Holy shit. Well, that's right. You live in Southern California now. Like, my first thought is like, limes in Chicago?
That would be well nigh impossible without a... You could do it with a sunroom, but... no, I mean, to me, what's the point of living in Southern California unless you're going to have a lime tree? So I have
when
two.
Allie and Zach lived in Santa Barbara, I shit you not, they had both avocado bushes and a passion fruit tree in their backyard that were just growing there, like it
not
just
even
happened.
like planted, right?
No,
Like
oh shit, we have avocados. There's this great road outside of like Carlsbad, like east of Carlsbad, like you're way inland at this point.
Yep.
And it is called the Avocado Highway. And I believe it is both officially called the Avocado Highway and sort of like colloquially also called the Avocado Highway, because I would come home from bike rides with like avocados, not the size of real footballs, but the size of like play footballs.
Yeah.
So like that long, like a significant
like
avocado.
a 6-inch avocado or a 5-inch avocado.
6-inch avocado. That was like, it was like as girthy as it was long.
There's a specific species of them that's a little bit bigger, and because they're a little rounder, I think, and a
little greener. As well.
And a little greener, right? Like paler green, less. I know the ones you're talking about. I know that area, the like this sort of hills kind of northeast of San Diego, kind of Miramar area is really beautiful.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Yeah.
Maybe we should dive into our book.
We should. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah.
This is a good book.
It's a good book.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's another one of those, like, I mean, I think you and I have like a similar experience of it, where we just sort of have like witnessed it in like airport bookstores for 23 years.
Right.
And have never really had the chance to kind of pick it up. And I think it sits, you referenced another book recently where you're like, every single beach rental has that particular book in it. Yeah.
It's Lonesome Dovian.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Or if you like James Clavelian. I feel like those are the two. Right?
Right, exactly.
Or Mishner's like one word named after a place name. No, right? Like Chesapeake, Poland, like Hawaii. Which I believe those books are all good, from what I understand. I mean, like, there's a reason those books are everywhere, but there's something about seeing like Bill Clinton and Oprah holding up a book where you're just like, I don't know, man. Like, I really want you all to read Khaled Hosseini's great book. It'll help you understand what's going on in Afghanistan today. And you're like, I don't know. It's like there's something about books being ubiquitous that can sometimes be a turnoff, and there's something about a certain style of cover.
This cover.
It's this cover, like a sort of corporate-y, like I don't think it's a great cover design.
And it's really not. It's like the cover design is also ubiquitous. It hasn't changed as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be interesting. Internet at us with all of the different covers of Khaled Hosseini's.
Yeah. And the cover just says, Bill Clinton and Oprah want you to read this.
Yeah, exactly. Or in my version that the San Francisco Chronicle wants me to read it. And the New York Times book review finds it powerful, ellipsis, haunting.
Right.
Which just means that those two words appeared somewhere.
It's never not available at Hudson News.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like the two blurbs on my cover are just so insipid.
Yeah.
A moving portrait of modern Afghanistan.
Yeah, right. Well, and like maybe we can get into this analysis because I actually felt as though the first few chapters read that way too. But maybe we should recap and then because I have a specific question.
Yeah,
about
you got a
that.
question in there that I see about the hook, which I'm excited to talk about. Listeners, as you may have surmised by this point, we are talking about Khaled Hosseini's 2001. I keep getting dates wrong, but I do think it's 2001.
I think that's right.
Novel, The Kite Runner.
Which, by the way, is good timing if you're going to publish a book about Afghanistan.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's that almost touches on my
It was actually 2003.
Yep, that's what I see now. I'm looking at the frontispiece. So,
but still,
2003.
Good timing.
Yes, excellent timing. So we meet Amir, who is our narrator and ostensible main character of the book, though we've only read the first half, and we've read plenty of books where things change. And Hassan, two childhood friends in Afghanistan. Both of them are motherless. Amir's mother died in childbirth, and Hassan's mother ran off about 5 days after bearing him. The marriage of Hassan's father, Ali, and his mother was a real mismatch, sort of almost 20 years different. Ali is very religious, and Hassan's mother had a sort of not a great reputation. And runs away a few days after having him and saying something very mean to Ali about Hassan after she bears him.
Well, and specifically because she sees his hair lip. Ali also has a disability. He has a limp. But Hassan is the son of Ali. Ali is Amir's father's servant.
Yes,
and
they grew up together. Yeah.
They grew up together, and then Hassan and Amir have a similar friendship / sort of like servant and vassal or servant and master relationship that the parents have. Hassan is devoted to Amir. And Amir really likes Hassan too, although there is a kind of one-wayness to many elements of the relationship. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, Hassan defends him when the local bully hassles him. And Amir is kind of... his father thinks of him as kind of a wimpy kid, whereas Hassan, even though he's very gentle and very kind, is actually more daring athletically, stands up for him in his fights. And Amir is aware that his father actually, is a little bit disappointed that he is not more courageous and that he's not more athletic. Amir is also kind of intellectual. He's a good student. He's a good writer. And I think his father is proud of that. He's not like against the intellectualness of his son, but he just wishes he was a little bit more physically courageous and less squeamish.
Yeah, he wouldn't mind if his son read poetry, but isn't crazy about the fact that his son writes poetry. Yeah, so even though Amir is no great athlete, he is very good at kite combat, and every winter that is something that happens in Kabul, that there are these competitions where boys, I'm guessing that they're predominantly boys in this particular period in Afghan history, though this is Afghan history before communist coup, before the Taliban, before a lot of that stuff.
Right.
And it does seem to be a more progressive period in Afghanistan. We also hear about Tehran as sort of like a
big
metropolitan
city.
big city.
That's where all the good movies and books
it's where the
come
good
from.
movies, and you can get alcohol and everything like that. It's so interesting reading this book as sort of a relic of late 70s Middle Eastern turmoil. But so there are these kite combats. Amir is good at them. He and Hassan kind of work together. Hassan is sort of his assistant and spool holder, kind of manages the line. And Amir kind of gets the sense from his father that if he were to win the Kabul kite contest, that would do quite a bit to level up his position in his father's eyes. And Amir does it. And one thing that happens, this is the title of the book, is that there are people that are called kite runners. And when a kite is sort of cut free of its tether and that person has lost, the kite begins to drift away. And Hassan is extremely good at figuring out where the kites are and where they're going to come down. And it is like a piece of... it's like a point of pride to go and collect one of the kites.
And if you catch it, you can keep it.
Yeah, and there's this great section that there are no rules except that if you catch the kite, that you get to keep it. Hassan goes to catch the other kite that Amir has won by defeating. He doesn't come back, and Amir goes to look for his friend, kind of runs through Kabul, talking to, in particular, a sort of marketplace
vendor of some kind.
Vendor, that kind of thing. Yeah. Who says, "Oh yeah, I saw your friend. He was being basically followed by some other boys." And Amir goes and sees that Hassan is being challenged by the same bullies that Hassan sort of fought off not too long ago. Hassan again tries to stand up to the bullies. There's 3 of them. They defeat him, and the head of them rapes Hassan.
He gives him the option of giving the kite back rather than being raped, and Hassan chooses not to accept that offer out of loyalty to Amir. Amir is watching this and is tortured with indecision and cowardice. You know, he can see what's happening, but he doesn't have the courage to do anything about it. It's an excruciating scene, and it takes a long time because there are a couple of flashbacks and other things that happen in the middle of it. So then there's a tremendous amount of dramatic irony because Amir is now deeply in his father's favor. His father is really proud of him and wants to celebrate and throws a 13th birthday party. But Amir is racked with guilt. Because he didn't do anything to intervene. And there's some class issues that kind of come up here, too. The bullies, when they are tormenting Hassan, suggest that Amir isn't really his friend. And Amir, I think, fears that is true. Particularly because of his cowardice. You have a note here. I hadn't picked this up that Hassan had to serve drinks to his.
He has to serve drinks to the boys that attacked him. The attacker is it's sort of like his odiousness is kind of turned up to 11. Yeah. He's the son of a German woman and an Afghan, and he's depicted kind of as Aryan, and he gives Amir a copy of Mein Kampf for his birthday.
That's right.
Oh.
Yes, I had forgotten about that. I hadn't put all that together that was the same person. So it's brutal. The other thing is that Hassan is both Shia and most of the characters are Sunni, and he is also Hazara, which is kind of a Central Asian ethnicity. He looks a little bit epicanthic, or Chinese or something like that too, and that is he is subject to bullying because of that, because of essentially ethnic prejudice or racial prejudice. So Amir is racked with guilt. He doesn't enjoy the birthday party, and he disappoints his father again because he won't express any gratitude. He's given multiple opportunities to tell Ali or his father's best friend, whose name I'm forgetting right now, who's kind of an avuncular figure.
Rahim Khan. He's wonderful.
Rahim Khan, right, who is wonderful, who also is alluded to in the very first paragraph of the book, too. But he doesn't explain what's going on. And in fact, after the party, he steals his own money or something, basically fabricates a situation and accuses Hassan of theft. Hassan confesses to the theft, which is weird because he didn't actually do it, but he knows Amir has done it and he's protecting him. But essentially, Ali, Hassan's father, figures out what has happened and basically has realized that Amir can't tolerate his guilt, and so sort of basically quits.
Yeah.
And Baba,
quits the family.
Quits the family. Baba, the father, whose name I don't know that we ever get, is heartbroken. But doesn't realize why this has happened, so he's confused. He's heartbroken. Amir is sort of relieved by this because he can't bear to be around Hassan and Ali because they know him for the coward that he is, but he also, I think, feels bad that he's caused all this. He's racked with guilt. And then we very quickly move to the communist coup and the need for Amir and Hassan to get out of town.
They do escape. They have kind of a harrowing escape through a series of trucks and basements and then, terrifyingly, a fuel truck. An emptied fuel truck, which still is even empty, a very not good place to be. They managed to get to Peshawar, and then from there to California. A structure that sort of mimics Hosseini's life in the grand tradition of many debut novels.
Indeed. And then, there's actually, this is kind of one of my favorite sections. There are some chapters in that kind of bring our first half to a close of life in the United States. And Baba is struggling with the transition. He has a run-in with some Vietnamese storekeepers and gets deeply offended when they won't accept credit, essentially. He was a wealthy man in Afghanistan, and he makes his living as something like a manager.
He's a gas station attendant.
A manager, and then he makes extra money on the weekends, kind of like hustling. But he's got this kind of indomitable spirit, so he does find a way to kind of, keep a roof overhead, and actually manages to save up enough money to buy Amir a car when Amir graduates from high school. And there's a really nice moment between the two when they go out drinking at a bar. And Baba buys everybody drinks because he's so proud of his son. And he's not a wealthy man, but he's
like hooking people up with jukebox money.
He's at the center of everything, and he can tell it's all because he's deeply proud of his son, and he loves his son. And this becomes a sort of high point, I think, in the novel here too. And then it actually doesn't necessarily decline right away, because in the next couple of chapters, Amir falls in love with an Afghan woman, Soraya Taheri. I can't quite remember where we stopped, but the chapter that I read to, they actually got engaged. And Amir learns that she had been with another man several years back, which many Afghan men would find shameful and wouldn't want her. But Amir is a little bit stung by it, but still wants to be with her after all. And so they make plans to marry. But meanwhile, Baba now has cancer, and his health is in precipitous decline. And that's basically the end of the section I read.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I got to as well. But we're like the book's 370 pages in my edition, so we're just a few pages shy of 200 or so.
Yep.
I wanted to start with a reading.
Okay.
I really enjoyed the writing in this book. I think it's quite excellent. I Also think that the structuring and the architecture of the book is very tight. It's and to some degrees it's a little too neat. It's a little too intricate. It's a little too well wrought, but it doesn't offend me in any, like, I'm sort of like, yeah, it's fine. It's like going to watch a really good but not great movie, perhaps, like a really good movie but not, not Chinatown.
And what would make it like even better would be to be a little bit less perfect. I think.
Yeah.
It's like the book, and I have an interesting story about that too. But let's do your reading, and then
this is the depiction of the kite battle. I'm going to read about a page, so I hope it doesn't take too long.
Okay.
At least 24 kites already hung in the sky, like paper sharks roaming for prey. Within an hour, the number doubled, and red, blue, and yellow kites glided and spun in the sky. A cold breeze wafted through my hair. The wind was perfect for kite flying, blowing just hard enough to give some lift, make the sweeps easier. Next to me, Hassan held the spool, his hands already bloodied by the string. Soon the cutting started, and the first of the defeated kites whirled out of control. They fell from the sky like shooting stars with brilliant, rippling tails, showering the neighborhoods below with prizes for the kite runners. I could hear the runners now, hollering as they ran the streets. Someone shouted reports of a fight breaking out 2 streets down. I kept stealing glances at Baba sitting with Rahim Khan on the roof, wondered what he was thinking. Was he cheering for me? Or did a part of him enjoy watching me fail? That was the thing about kite flying. Your mind drifted with the kite. They were coming down all over the place now, the kites, and I was still flying. My eyes kept wandering over to Baba, bundled up in his wool sweater. Was he surprised I had lasted as long as I had? You don't keep your eyes to the sky, you won't last much longer. I snapped my gaze back to the sky. A red kite was closing in on me. I'd caught it just in time. I tangled a bit with it, ended up besting him when he became impatient and tried to cut me from below. Up and down the streets, kite runners were returning triumphantly, their captured kites held high. They showed them off to their parents, their friends, but they all knew the best was yet to come. The biggest prize of all was still flying. I sliced a bright yellow kite with a coiled white tail. It cost me another gash on the index finger, and blood trickled down into my palm. I had Hassan hold the string and sucked the blood dry, blotted my finger against my jeans. So, like, in those, 4 paragraphs, the way, not only is the writing clear, concise, arresting, the moments of figuration are beautiful and apt. Describing something like a shooting star at first feels trite. And then you're like, no, a kite with streamers falling out of the sky. That's that's the place where that's going to work. And then there are odd metaphors like paper sharks roaming for prey.
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen lots of kites or kite boards in an area, it does have this weird oceanic movement to it.
Yeah. And the illusion of life. Too.
Yeah, exactly. Right. This and that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Contained within these 4 paragraphs, we have Amir's attention drifting towards his father, hoping for approval, while the person who truly loves him is standing there next to him holding the spool. Both of their hands are getting cut up. So there's this incredible figurative thing happening. There's a relationship thing happening, and there's a concrete description of action that is really working. And it's really good. It's just this you see these moments where you're like, oh wow, this is a piece of art that is really functioning on a lot of different levels. It's really impressive. And so that's why I grabbed that piece, because I was like, oh wow, I think this is a very good kind of Hosseini at his best.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think especially, it actually reminds me of Margaret Atwood, the sort of weaving of the action with the internality, the mind wondering, is his father wanting him to fail or not, and then snapping back. I thought that in particular was handled with the visuals. I will admit I have a mild complaint that I never felt like, and this could just be a matter of taste, I never felt like I really understood how you cut kites. And I actually spent about 2 hours researching it on my own because I was unset. You know, he would be like, "Oh, he used the old dip and dive trick," or like, "I cut him when he was impatient from behind." But I was like, I don't understand what it means to cut a kite. And you know, what you kind of need to understand is that they treat the string with something
Glass.
sharp, like glass, which is why their hands are getting cut up and why they need a spool manager. And then the other thing is that there are various techniques for whenever the kite string touch each other to sort of quickly move your string in such a way that it's never 100% guarantee, but you're able to sort of increase the odds that the other guy's string will cut and that yours won't. And that might mean quickly letting out the spool, or it might be quickly jerking it in. And that's also why, you know, you get cut sometimes, is that you have to move the string really quickly and it's sharp. And I thought that could have been better explained. So that's like, I've got my little like notch on the board there. But yeah, I totally agree. And I think it relates to my next question, which was, I don't know if you had the same experience I did, which was like the first 4 or 5 chapters, I felt like I was reading like an important book. You know, do you know what I mean? I'm like, this is an important book to read. It's about Afghanistan. I should know about. Felt like, you know, if you've ever been traveling and you like pick up a memoir or a history of the place you're traveling, and you just like, you might spend an hour every day reading it, and then you're like, okay, now I'm going to read whatever I want. Like I'll pick up my notes. Like it kind of felt like that, like lots of memoir. At a certain point, though, I was hooked. Yeah. And I'm curious if that happened to you, and if so, what was that point?
No, you're right. It's ponderous. Like, I don't know if, you know, I don't read a lot of new fiction these days. Yeah. There's a time question. Most of the reading that I do for this show. But even before we were doing the show, like, it was rare that I was reading, you know, fiction that was coming out all the time. Yeah. And I feel like the last time I was reading new fiction was the period kind of between 2001 and 2010. And like, I feel like I read a whole bunch of books that were like different culture, young person does something inexcusable with familial consequence, right? Like Atonement. You know, Atonement's the other one that really leapt to mind. And there's lots. I mean, like, you know, if you think about like that's it's sort of a classic structure of like the kid that, you know, and I sort of you feel that coming, especially because of the way that the book opens with its sort of little prologue.
And it's heavily foreshadowed throughout.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe even a little too much, I thought.
Yeah, I you know, like the you know, like, so Stevenson, we've talked about this before, that there's like so much setting up of the chessboard. Right. And I think that if you are a huge Stevenson fan, like you really enjoy the setting up of the chessboard. Right. I think you and I enjoy a little bit more knocking all the chess pieces down. But this felt a little bit like that. Like I could really feel that I was like, okay, and this kind of leads into my next point, but like, it felt a little ponderous to me. And I think it was like sort of around maybe like 30 or 40 pages into the book where like it began to really pick up. I think the same thing as you said, sort of 4 or 5 chapters. And I think it's kind of around the moment where Amir makes up the story for Hassan and Hassan loves it. And Amir writes another story, and his dad isn't interested, but Rahim Khan is. And Amir begins to realize that his ability with words is going to draw people to him. And it's one of the things that Hassan loves about him. So it's sort of around there. Yeah. And then once we get into the, you know, the sort of set piece of the kite combat, I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say like that kite combat chapter for me was the first time where it kind of reminded me of the like going out and killing the dog in Parable of the Sower, which is like, I'm like, finally some action, you know? Yeah. Even though we had the bully, and there is this sort of creeping sense that something bad's going to happen from the very beginning. The bully set it up, and I think the moment where I was like, oh no, was when Hassan doesn't come back right away with the kite. And I'm like, this is going to be bad. This is going to be really, really bad. And I realized, like, okay, I'm not just watching anymore. I'm invested in these characters. I'm invested in both of them in a way that, like, it had been building, but that was the moment where it really, really got me there. And, which is a little late. But it happened. It came through. And, and now, I sense this book is heading towards some kind of redemptive arc. But I'm curious about the details. He's got me at this point.
Yeah, me too. I sort of wondered, my big question at the moment is like, well, wait, what's going to happen in the middle of this book?
Yeah.
Because we know from the very beginning that Amir gets a message from Rahim Khan
at age 38, like, 26 years later after the Kite
2001. Yeah, it's that basically like you need to come home, and there's some sort of like very vague but poignant message
he
about
says,
like
there's a way you can become good again.
Become good again. Yeah. So there's this redemptive arc, and it does make me wonder that like the middle of the book is like, oh, are we going to get like this kind of rom-com with Soraya, which is the way that it's kind of beginning.
Well, and so like I see that too, but then it's sort of like so then if becoming good again means either making it up to Hassan or being less of a coward, being courageous, then what has to happen in the next section is Amir has to grow. Right, yeah. Like and I could sort of see. I mean, marrying a woman who other people wouldn't have married because of her past history. I mean, any marriage will make you grow, right? And also dealing with his father's sickness. There's certainly the opportunity for growth that's coming up here. But I see your point. You're sort of like, well, can't we just go back and help poor Hassan, who's been struggling for the past 26 years.
After the intensely my favorite section of the book was the confrontation between the two fathers and the two sons. Yeah. And it's not even really a confrontation because it doesn't quite go the way that Amir wants it to go. He wants Hassan to deny it, and then for his father to become angry and basically eject Ali and Hassan. That's sort of what he thinks is going to happen. But instead, he realizes that Hassan has told his father everything. His father knows that Amir has been cowardly and has set this whole thing up. And in this just very, like, I imagine, incredibly surprising moment for a 13-year-old, because that's how old Amir is at this moment, where Ali basically is like, no, we have lived together, Baba, for 40, more than 40 years, and I'm leaving. I'm breaking up I'm divorcing you, basically.
It's excruciating. There's a
so well written.
There's a whole series of moments where Amir's cowardice is just excruciating, and actually it makes me want to do the reading I was going to do later.
Go for it
now, because it begins in this particular moment and then it just continues for several chapters. So I'll do my reading now. So this is right before the rape, and so Amir has tracked down Hassan and the three bullies, and he is watching from cover, and he lacks the courage to go. I mean, there's several things he could do. He could intervene. Yeah. So he's watching. Asef is the name of the head bully, Where's your slingshot, Hazara? Asif said, turning the brass knuckles in his hand. What was it you said? They'll have to call you One-Eyed Asif. That's right. One-Eyed Asif. That was clever. Really clever. Then again, it's easy to be clever when you're holding a loaded weapon. I realized I still hadn't breathed out. I exhaled slowly, quietly. I felt paralyzed. I watched them close in on the boy I'd grown up with, the boy whose hair-lipped face had been my first memory. But today is your lucky day, Hazara, Asif said. He had his back to me, but I would have bet he was grinning. I'm in a mood to forgive. What do you say to that, boys? That's generous, Kamal blurted, especially after the rude manners he showed us last time. He was trying to sound like Asif, except there was a tremor in his voice. Then I understood. He wasn't afraid of Hassan. Not really. He was afraid because he had no idea what Asif had in mind. Asif waved a dismissive hand. Bakshida. Forgiven. It's done. His voice dropped a little. Of course, nothing is free in this world, and my pardon comes with a small price. That's fair, Kamal said. Nothing is free, Wally added. You're a lucky Hazara, Asif said, taking a step towards Hassan, because today it's only going to cost you that blue kite. A fair deal, boys, isn't it? More than fair, Kamal said. Even from where I was standing, I could see the fear creeping into Hassan's eyes, but he shook his head. Amir Aga won the tournament, and I ran this kite for him. I ran it fairly. This is his kite. A loyal Hazara, loyal as a dog, Asif said. Kamal's laugh was a shrill, nervous sound. But before you sacrifice yourself for him, think about this. Would he do the same for you? Have you ever wondered why he never includes you in games when he has guests? Why he only plays with you when no one else is around? I'll tell you why, Hazara. Because to him, you're nothing but an ugly pet. Something he can play with when he's bored. Something he can kick when he's angry. Don't ever fool yourself and think you're something more. Amir Aga and I are friends, Hassad said. He looked flushed. Friends? Asif said, laughing. You pathetic fool. Someday you'll wake up from your little fantasy and learn just how good of a friend he is. Now, boss, enough of this. Give us that kite. And Hassan, doesn't give him the kite. Amir continues to watch, helpless, and has so many chances to intervene. And the scene that you were just describing with the two families confront, it's not too late, right? Amir can say, you know what? It was me. I'm so sorry, but a terrible thing happened, and I feel awful about it. And, it would be a hard thing for a 13-year-old to do, admittedly, but I just feel like one of the things that's pretty masterful about this book is the way Khaled Hosseini just tortures us with Amir's helplessness and cowardice in this situation. I say cowardice, I don't, it's a weird thing because it's both despicable and relatable.
I think we've all done things when we were, 11, 12, 13, 14 that are despicable to us and probably understandable to everyone else.
Right.
And that was kind of my question about architecture. And I think where you're pointing out that feeling of dread that grabs you right from the get-go in this book and then just sort of lingers on so that even in the upbeats, there is this palpable sense that Amir is trundling towards a very bad decision.
Yeah.
You're right. At any point he could be I fucked up. But because of the nature of his relationship with his father and the guilt that he has that his mother died in childbirth, that he's incapable of that at this particular moment. And I think you're right. We're going to see the growth that allows Amir to redeem himself. And my question about the architecture is, and we've already kind of hit on it a little bit, is that it's so neatly plotted. Everything like fits into like a really nice little slot, you know, of like Amir is guilty because his mother died in childbirth. His father kind of exacerbates that wound by like never really like loving his son in a way that would be acceptable. Amir feels like he has to like compete for his father's affection, even though he's getting abundant affection from Hassan. And so it's this like, it's a very tight yarn of misplaced guilt and affection.
Yeah.
Amazingly well rendered. But maybe, I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer if it's too well rendered. But it does sort of fit. I can understand why this book is still on the bookshelves at Hudson News.
Yeah, yeah. You know, yes, I completely agree with your question. And so I've got two answers to
Awesome.
it.
Good. Help me out.
So one is I was listening to an interview with Khaled Hosseini, and he said that he got a book deal or sometime around the time that he was first interacting with an agent around this book. He had a like computer crash, and he lost a third of the manuscript. And I think it was like he had already sent a version. I don't know, and I don't quite understand the details, but basically he had to rewrite the middle third of the book from memory.
Oh my God.
And he was kind of panicked about it. He didn't talk to his agent about it, and he did it. But when he did it, he kind of realized he added some stuff that hadn't been in there the first, and that's where you get the scenes of Baba during the graduation buying everybody the drinks. And that's where you get them kind of cruising around at the yard sale or the flea market and that kind of stuff. And even Khaled Hosseini said it ended up being kind of some of my favorite part of the book. And I think that I agree with that. And I think part of the reason that I agree is that, like, for the first third of the book, everything is doing something to serve that narrative structure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like, every sentence is like some example of the father, Baba, not giving Amir enough affection, or of Hassan being loyal, or of Amir being cowardly.
Yeah.
It's like everything is doing that in the way that if you're writing a short story, it has to be like that, right?
Yep.
But in
Totally.
a novel, I think that when someone is committed to a novel, there can be things that are just sort of feel lifelike and inconsistent.
Yeah.
You know, like in our Tom Ripley series, Talented Mr. Ripley, you said something about characters being consistently inconsistent, right?
Yeah.
And I think a novel has room to meander a little bit. Now, we've seen them meander too much, right? But I think that the first third of the book doesn't meander enough. I think the physics of the narrative are too perfect, and that's like, it's still very, very good, but I actually start liking the book a lot more when we get into that section that he had to rewrite because he lost his draft.
Yeah, it does. I mean, like we've only read about like a half of that middle third.
Yeah.
It really, like, we haven't even finished the book, and I'm like, it's a 3-act structure. Like, it has to be a 3-act structure.
Right.
It really feels like a 3-act structure. And it does, like, so far, this like clunky flea market romance. There's even this great line where he starts calling Soraya his swap meet princess.
Yeah.
And it's just so endearing. It's endearingly slightly more open to the air.
And it has more upbeats and more downbeats, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like in the first section, the trajectory is sort of like, yeah, it's like heading down. And actually, my second answer to your question, if you'll permit, is a little bit of show and tell.
I love it.
But I have to
love it.
share the screen. Okay, so I'm going to do a screen share. I'm going to share sound. And let me see if I have the thing I wanted to share with you open and available. Oh, I might have to open it up again. It's really weird. I was just watching.
The sounds you're making are endlessly like
like robot searching sounds.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be. Yeah. That was sort of a dot matrix sound. Your brain does not sound like a dot matrix printer. No.
Let's see if I can open up the media player. That was what I was using. Oh, got it. Okay, here we go. All right, you should be seeing an old man's back to us.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, this is a lecture from Kurt Vonnegut from like 1980, and it is for some strange reason being translated into Catalan in the subtitles. So he's drawing a graph where the y-axis is good and bad outcomes for the character, and the x-axis is time, and he's graphing.
It's like we're in a similar like Hamlet's hit points, the Robin D. Laws in Project Hail Mary, but as rendered by Kurt Vonnegut, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
Nobody ever gets tired of this story. I call it Man in a Hole, but it needn't be about a man in a hole.
Yep.
Somebody gets into trouble, gets out of it again.
Amazing.
The far end is a little higher than where we began, because the reader thinks, well, by God, I'm a human being too. I must have that much in reserve if I get into trouble or whatever. Now, another story that's very popular, and none of these are copyrighted, is I call it Boy Meets Girl, but it needn't be about a boy or a girl. It's somebody on a day like any other day comes across something perfectly wonderful. Oh boy! This is my lucky day. Shit.
I love the Catalan subtitle right now.
And gets it back again. Now, another story. It's very popular, and it breaks my rule. Starts down here. It's a young girl, teenage, I guess, maybe 17, 18. Why is she so low? Well, her mother's died. It's reading enough, right? And her father has remarried almost immediately to a terrible old battle axe with two mean daughters. And there's a party at the palace that night. You've heard it. All right, so she has to help her new mother and her new sisters, get dressed for this party. And she doesn't get to go. He said, no, she's not good enough to go, but they are. So did she get even sadder? No. She's a stout-hearted little girl. It's maximum grief is death of her mother. So everybody leaves for the party, and the fairy godmother shows up and gives her pantyhose, mascara, perfume, everything, means of transportation, carriage with horses and everything. Everything you need to go to a party and have a good time. So she goes, and the prince falls in love with her. Now you must realize she is so heavily made up that her own relatives don't recognize her. Okay, so the clock strikes 12, as promised, and so she loses all the stuff. It's all taken away, and the fairy godmother said that was going to happen. It's a very steep drop here. It doesn't take.
He does like 5 more. It's pretty fun.
Does she drop down to the same level?
He does Hamlet at some point, which he also points out starts very similar to Cinderella.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and I pointed this out too because I feel like, kind of to my point earlier, I was trying to kind of map this story, and I feel like Amir, you kind of hard to know where Amir starts, but I feel like Amir starts a little bit below Origin on the y-axis, because while he does have his friendship with Hassan, he doesn't fully appreciate that, and he does not have he has the guilt about his mother dying, and then he has the lack of the relationship he wants with his father.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting because even though he wins the kite contest and that solves the father's problem, he can't actually enjoy it. So I would argue he starts low and goes lower. And then the middle section ends up being a kind of slow creeping back to the middle. Yeah. And I think what I enjoy about the middle section is that it's sort of like, it's bouncy, you know, there are highs and lows. And I feel like the book, it's really good in the first third, but part of it, I feel like, and maybe he's a first-time novelist at this point too, is that like everything is serving that physics of that narrative, and that weighs the book down just a little bit. Yeah. And by the time that he kind of knew the story he wanted to tell, and he came back and wrote the middle third, it's like he's allowing himself to be like a little bit more playful within, you know, the universe he's created. It's kind of like he's in the Kite Runner cinematic universe, and we're going to do some side quests with like yard sales and stuff like that.
We sort of let go of the parabola.
Yeah.
You know, and so I would say that the way to like accurately graph this novel is that there are two lines. There's a line for Amir and a line for Hassan, and they're inversely proportionate to each other.
Yeah.
And so I think the reason why we might be enjoying the middle of the book is that there's a little more space for the reader.
Yeah.
Because in the first third of the book, it is so tightly plotted. And I think I have a hypothesis that the reason why I never picked this up before now, it's a problem of snobbery. I'm going to own that. But when you see a book like this having the success that it does and showing up in the places that it does, like you were saying about Oprah and Bill Clinton sort of hectoring you to read the book, there's a part of you that's like, but like that's what makes a book upper middle browish.
Yeah.
So what I think why we are enjoying the middle third of the book slightly more than the first third, we don't know what's happening to the other line.
Yeah.
So like Hassan's line becomes a dotted line, or an area of like of vagueness. And that is important for your reader.
and Amir's is squiggly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. And there's a note I wrote about the balanced narrative, because I think what's the physics of the first third of the book, the two lines are in phase with each other. You know, and when two waves are in phase with one another, they cancel each other out. Yeah. You know, and it kind of flattens the narrative in a way. And it is, it's a bizarre. It's more interesting if things are always a little out of balance. You never want your story really living in that zero on the y-axis. You always want it at like -1 or +3, or transitioning somehow, you know, from one to the other. It's going to cross the middle, but you don't want it to linger. And maybe the first third of the book, it just lingers for too long.
Yeah, it feels too it's too square. There's not enough room for me. Yeah. It's there's this kind of play that kind of appeared in the sort of 18th, 19th century that is just called the well-made play. And it is, you know, like it's like usually a 3-act structure or a 4-act structure. It's very predictable. There are examples that kind of rise, but it's basically like the theatricals version of pulp.
It's like one character gonna end up with a happy ending, one character is gonna end up with a sad ending, one character is gonna end up with a mixed ending, right?
Right. There's like a comic section. You know, it's very formulaic.
There's a tragedy, there's a redemption, there's a weakness, there's a gaining of strength, and the narrative physics all equal 0 by the end. Yeah. It's a zero-sum game.
And I'm gonna reference, the best class that I ever took, which was in the journalism school when I was in graduate school, and I went to graduate school for writing poetry and stuff like that. But my last semester, I got to take this journalism class that you and I have talked about a bunch, when I was essentially like, oh shit, this is what I want to be doing. And my professor talked about fluid dynamics as a good way to think about the pieces that you write.
And this is the legendary Lawrence Weschler, right? Like
it is, yes.
Yep.
I was trying not to.
Oh.
I was not.
Sorry,
I was not going into name dropping world, but that's okay.
You're not slagging him.
No, I'm not slagging him at all. He was in the top 3 of teachers I ever had.
Well, I think the reason it's worth naming him is that he's a unique thinker about nonfiction narrative.
Yeah,
and he's written a lot of essays about it, and they're just like, I feel like it's not about like boasting or bragging. It's about like this guy. I was lucky enough to have a conversation with him one time, and I've read a bunch of his writing, and he's just worth listening to when it comes to narrative.
What Ren talked about was the fluid dynamics part. He was like, pipes don't work when they are perfectly smooth. When you have a pipe that has water running through it and the surface of the inside of the pipe is perfectly smooth, the water flows worse. And this is why golf balls have dimples on them and things like that, is when there is some sort of disturbance, and this is totally what you're talking about not wanting your narrative to have a zero-sum nature to it, it flows better. Yeah. And I think, like the first third of this book is like, it's so good, but it is there's not enough messiness, like you're saying. I think a good counterexample would be The Mysteries of Pittsburgh, Michael Chabon's debut novel. It's brilliant, but it's really messy, but it's messy in a very attractive way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, God, what a hard lesson for first-time novelists to learn. Like anyone who's tried to write a story, like getting the narrative physics right at all and the descriptions right at all is hard enough. And I actually feel like Khaled Hosseini, I'm sure he hated this at the time, but it was probably a blessing that he lost that. And you know what? And I think in many cases, if you're a first-time novelist, this sounds crazy, but if you could somehow
pay a friend to break into your house
and steal your
manuscript.
Yeah, you probably would be better off, right?
Yeah.
Because you know the story and you know the world, and you're probably less anxious about figuring out those things, and you know the narrative physics, so you can play around a little bit in it. And but yeah, you know what? On that note, I'd be willing to go to trivia because I have a few other things, but I feel like we got
one short passage I want to read.
Sure.
Where it's just an example of a moment, and this is probably good for a debut novel, but this is on page 121, a moment where the writing chops just fades a little bit. And this is Hosseini writing a passage where Amir and his father have been in the fuel truck for a few number of days. And I think this is a moment where it doesn't work. And I was like, oh, interesting. So far the sentence construction has been almost pitch perfect, and it's just good to do this every now and then.
Yep.
Panic. You open your mouth. Open it so wide your jaws creak. You order your lungs to draw air. Now you need air. Need it now. But your airways ignore you. They collapse, tighten, squeeze, and suddenly you're breathing through a drinking straw. Your mouth closes and your lips purse, and all you can manage is a strangled croak. Your hands wriggle and shake. Somewhere a dam has cracked open and a flood of cold sweat spills, drenches your body. You want to scream. You would if you could, but you have to breathe to scream.
What's that from? I don't remember this.
That's when they're in the fuel truck.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I think maybe the reason why you don't remember it is it's very bland.
Yeah.
Where the writing has been lyrical and very showing in a good way.
Yeah.
This is a flood of cold sweat, breathing through a drinking straw. It's just one of those moments where you're like, oh, you weren't like you didn't have enough coffee that day and your editor missed this. And like, sure, I could hear somebody making a case that this is narration from the space of like an oxygen starved brain.
Yeah.
It doesn't, that wouldn't fly for me, I think. And the only reason I bring it up is to like show off, like that is a very small moment in what is a very well written rest of the book. But kind of everything he does in this first third needs a little more air.
It's sparse. The other moment like that for me, it's not a problem of like sentence construction, but I think it would have been, so there are several kind of like flashbacks in the moment, the time in which Amir catches up to the three boys before the rape, or the four boys before the rape, to the end of that scene takes like 30 pages or something like that. I may be exaggerating, and part of the reason it takes that long is there are several kind of like flashbacks or dream sequences, including one about Amir remembering the slaughter of the lamb for Eid, I believe.
Yeah.
And I found that, so first we read his description of watching the lambs being slaughtered, and that's a pretty long description, and it's a memory, and it's in flashback, and his father does it. And then the last image of that section is, I saw Hassan's eyes, they were the eyes of the lamb. I don't think you needed that. I think you could have put the lamb slaughtering like 100 pages earlier.
Yeah.
And I don't even know that you would have needed to remind us that Hassan's eyes were the eyes of the lamb. But I certainly didn't think it needed to happen then. I felt like it was one of those things, sort of like what we said about the bluest eye and the see Jane run, see Dick run, which is just like a writer's like, you know what? I got to literary this up a little bit. I know what would be good. Just like a non-sequential, like, what's the word I'm looking? A non sequitur, literary non sequitur that proves to have figurative value in this particular moment. That's how that felt to me. There was nothing about the writing of that part that was particular, writing in the sense of sentence of that part. I just thought it was a little bit of a mistake. I felt like the naturalism of what was happening was perfectly stark.
Probably enough. Yeah.
Enough. And it was horrific enough.
Yeah, there's a little of that like MFA-ication. Of like what happens when like 12 other people have their fingerprints on your manuscript for 2 years. Yep. It's sort of that like the great, like it takes like great restraint and self-trust to stick to your guns of your original vision and be like, I'm going to listen to Joey and Sarah in my workshop, but I'm not going to listen to all 12 people. Right. Because if you do, you end up with the great middling. You end up with the well-made novel. Regression to mediocrity. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Well, good point. But, and also to be extremely fair, Khaled Hosseini's third language is English. This novel was written in English.
And he's a doctor. That's everybody.
He's an MD. Right. He learned
Get
English
in line,
at
folks.
age 15. So, he's kicking our ass all over the laptop.
I mean, like, these are all, like... These I feel like these are the kind of moments that we can trot out when we're talking about a debut novel, because I really hope that at some point somebody listens to us and is like, oh, that was helpful.
Yeah, I find it helpful personally because I feel like we both put our finger on what was good but not great about the beginning of this novel, and the moments it really gets great, and it does get great. It does get great.
Yeah, for sure. This is the first half of this book is an A-, which that's that's high praise.
And then I feel like he's pulling it out of A- to straight up A level, like by the time we get to
the highest praise I can give anything is that there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
And which I think is a good way to look at things, and this still has a few things that are a little bit wrong with it. One of which is that it's a little too perfect.
So interesting.
Yeah,
That's a very interesting construction you just did.
I know that's but I think it's the right one.
Yeah.
Okay, trivia. I think I am up.
Yep.
So, in a kind of echo of John Irving's the grill parser, the pension grill parser.
Yeah.
So this was originally a short story, and he trotted it out. He submitted it to 2 very prestigious publications. I'm going to read you 3 of them. Your job is to pick the one that he did not submit the Kite Runner to.
Okay.
It was a 25-page short story. He was rejected twice, and then he stuck it in a box in his garage in like 1999 or something like that, and wasn't going to use it again until like a friend was like, hey, this is kind of good. So I'm going to read you 3 publications, none of which are Larry Niven connected, and your job is to pick the one that he did not submit the manuscript to.
Okay.
So, was it A, Harper's, B, Esquire, or C, The New Yorker?
Maybe this is just projecting, but I don't think that I would submit something to the New Yorker unless I'd been published somewhere else. Whereas maybe I would to Harper's or Esquire. Although it was the 90s, so all these things are a little bit different. But I don't even think you can submit fiction to the New Yorker unless they know who you are. I don't think there's a submission process. I think there is the editor, and they're like, what have you got process. So I'm going to say C, the New Yorker.
It was A, Harper's.
Ah.
He was rejected by Esquire and the New Yorker. I think you're right. I think that has changed. The only stuff that they take in over the transom now are talk pieces and poetry. Right. That's all you can submit to them.
That's what I thought too. Although now they have daily talk online, so it's a little bit easier to get a talk of shots and murmurs also.
You're right. Yeah, that's right. Humor is that's another one that you can get in there.
Yep.
Yes, I was I don't know. That was a tough one. That was a guess.
It's just a pure guess, I think, at that point, because it's not like there's so many stories of great writers getting rejected by great magazines and by great editors, and that happens all the time. I think the one lesson anybody can take from it is don't stop submitting if you
don't stop submitting. don't rely on the caprices of your friend finding your manuscript in the garage.
Yes.
Just keep going, everybody.
You're not trying unless you submit 30 times.
Yeah.
That's you can't say that you tried unless you submit 30 times. And that's like, and then try again after that. That's one try. All right. Also sort of literary history. Okay. Khaled Hosseini grew up reading poetry in, I believe, Farsi and maybe Dari or Pashto. But the first Western novel he read was translated into Persian or Farsi, and he found it serialized in an Iranian women's magazine.
Amazing.
Was that novel that had been translated to Farsi and serialized in a women's magazine The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty? A. B. Deliverance by James Dickey. C. The Stepford Wives by Ira Levin. Or D. The Ringworld Engineers.
That would be... Wow. Oh, my God. The Exorcist, Deliverance, or The Stepford Wives. Fuck. The Stepford Wives.
It was The Exorcist.
God damn it.
There's really no way to, I mean, again, it's a pure guess. The only slight clue is that, Deliverance also having a rape scene is a bit of a red herring.
Oh, okay. Yep, that would be a problem. Yep.
But yeah.
I went with the Stepford Wives out of another, you know how much I love unintentional irony.
Yeah.
And an Iranian women's magazine publishing the Stepford Wives serialized was just too
absolutely
too wonderful to pass up.
It's interesting that they would have run The Exorcist.
Really interesting.
What does Tehran culturally think of The Exorcist in 1972 or whatever year that novel came out?
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. I've never read that novel. I have no idea. I mean, obviously the story is compelling. I don't know if it's well written or not, but guess what we're doing next?
I think we're reading the second half.
You are correct. We're reading the second half. Ding. So we were both wrong on the trivia. Is the trivia getting harder, or are we just getting stupider?
We're just getting dumber.
We're just getting one or the other. Listeners, write us and tell us. Write hello at uppermiddlebrow.com and tell us if the trivia is getting harder or we're just getting dumber. And in the meantime, Upper Middlebrow is a small point production. Chris Bagg and Jesse Dukes are the government in exile. Music by Ben Pajak and Jesse Dukes. Design and website by Chris Bagg. You can learn more about us and find our listener survey at uppermiddlebrow.com. Please review us in our podcast app so other people can find the show. And you can always write us to say hi at hello@uppermiddlebrow.com. Or you can find us on social media and comment at us. We will comment back at you.
We sure will. And I'm going to throw in a name in here. I'm going to troll him lightly. As a reminder, Matt Lieto, Jesse and I are both writers and editors, and we can help you with your writing, podcasting, or editing project. You can see some of our portfolios and learn more at our respective websites, chrisbagg.com and jessedukes.com. No shade, Matt, but it's enjoyable editing your work, and we can do more of it.
And if a Persian magazine wants to serialize your novel, well, we probably can't help because I don't speak Farsi. I don't know about you.
I don't. I know some people who do, but that would be interesting.
Hey, finder's fee, connection.
Yep.
Reach out to Chris Bagg if you want to find a Farsi editor for your novel that you want to serialize.
Parvis, give me a call.